Welcome to Movies That Matter, the podcast about recent films going above and beyond the call of box office returns to boldly explore a social issue affecting people's lives. I'm Nicole Finari, and with me today is...
Lexy.
Welcome back, Lexy. What movie are we going to overanalyze this episode?
Late Night.
Directed by Nisha Ganatra from a screenplay by Mindy Kaling, Late Night stars Emma Thompson as the host of a late-night talk show who teams up with one of her new staff writers, played by Mindy Kaling, in an attempt to save the show. What did you think?
I really liked it.
I really liked it, too.
Okay. I thought it was funny. I thought Emma Thompson and Mindy Kaling had really good chemistry. It's funny, I was looking up the runtime of the movie. It was only an hour, and I think it was less than 2 hours, but it didn't feel too short. I just came away really enjoying it.
Yes, I did as well. So this will sneak up in our recommendations. I've been a huge fan of Emma Thompson for a very, very long time.
She's a great actress.
She's a great actress, and I just think she just took this part and she just made this movie
definitely
like incandescent. Like, it was just her at her best. And she always used to say she got into drama because comedy was too hard. And it was really nice to see her come back to her comedy roots. And there's a lot to sort of unpack about all of that, but and with
the actual character in the movie.
Yeah, just to see Emma Thompson play this role is such an absolute delight for me. Like, I can't recommend people going to it enough just to see a female actress kind of at in her prime, regardless of like her age, and you know what I mean? Like, This is just her absolutely getting the right part. Definitely.
And I think I thought this movie was really good. Not every movie is perfect, but one thing that stood out with my impression and all the different reviews that I read was that the acting and the two main characters really carried a lot of the movie. That they were really good. They
did. And it's no slouch to Mindy Kaling either. I think she, have I really seen her stretch out of her wheelhouse?
No.
Not too much.
No.
But she still did a great job. And
wrote a really good movie.
Yeah, she did. So I want to get into some of the little technical points. First and foremost, this was a comedy, and it was a comedy about comedy.
Yeah.
And I want to say, my audience laughed. I don't know if yours did. My audience found it funny.
Our audience was smaller. We were in a smaller theater, and I do remember people laughing, but definitely Jake and I were laughing the hardest in this movie.
So one of the issues I have found when people try to do movies like this is they keep telling you how funny something is, and then it's not that funny. And then it's a problem because you're like, I can see for myself that this isn't that funny. And so the show is premised on the fact that she's a late night host. She's very old fashioned in her sensibilities. And I want to dig into that a little bit later. But, her ratings have been in decline and she needs to improve the show. But when she does improve the show, the new bits that they add
were so funny.
Are genuinely funny. So you're like, oh, that's good. You're not left thinking this wouldn't really save the show, and then you sort of check out on the whole premise.
So they were one of them is sort of it's called, I think, White Savior.
Yeah.
It's Emma Thompson going out and helping other minority groups to do something silly like hail a cab, or I think she buys someone a bunch of clothes, and then the other one is about complaining to companies that have wronged you because celebrities get so much more attention than the average Joe, and so she does that for regular people. And I thought they were both very modern and very funny. Yeah,
if I can dig up the YouTube clips of them, I will post them in the show notes. But yeah, so it was like that. The comedy worked. I mean, obviously Mindy Kaling is a comedy writer. That is how she got her start. So the line deliveries were all good by the cast, and I just was like, they they nailed the one thing they had to do, which was believably make her a celebrity late night show host.
Yeah, I totally believed it.
To have her get better. So one of the things that I really liked about the movie, moving on to my second point, while you check your notes, so it's a little bit hidden, and they certainly don't bring this out in the trailers, and it's kind of a subtle point, but there's actually sort of 3 women at the center of this movie.
Yes. And I have a point, or I've sort of a point question about the third woman. The third woman is the CEO of the company that...
The new president of the network.
Yeah, the new show. In the president's interactions with Emma Thompson's character, they were very good. And I kept feeling like there was something deeper going on. Like maybe they had met through some past incident and there was history there. But then it seemed like they really just knew each other because she was the new president and there was nothing else besides the fact that she was canceling the show. But it felt like there was some like hidden secret or something. I don't know if you got that from watching their interactions.
I think there was. I think the 2 actresses really generated a hidden tension. I agree with you. And the sort of tension of one of the themes of the movies is how women fail to support each other.
Yeah.
Even when they're so hideously outnumbered, when you feel like there's only one spot for a woman to be successful.
You're gonna like push all the other women to the side.
Yeah, you'll step over them on your way to the top. And so I think you had this sort of interesting interaction between the president of the network, who Catherine Newberry, Emma Thompson's character, sees as a sort of crass commercialist, versus her high-mindedness, which the other woman finds really frustrating because in her high-mindedness, she's failed to innovate, she's failed to keep the show relevant, and she's on her way out.
So
yeah. And it's like, okay, but you do work for a television network. You do actually have to have an audience for this to work. You
sometimes have to do a little bit of pandering.
Yeah. But what I thought was one of the things I truly loved about this movie, which, it can be a minor point, but I thought was just really well done, was the costume design. And the way that they dress Catherine Newberry, the late night host, and she's always in this very, almost like Annie Hall, pants and blazers.
Yeah.
Very short haircut.
Yeah, I remember thinking, I'm loving all these suits.
Yeah, me too.
And seeing her come out each time for the show or in different scenes.
Often in these very bizarre sneakers when you see her feet.
That's true.
Like you never see her wear a dress. You very rarely see her wear heels.
Mm-hmm.
Versus Mindy Kaling, who, what did she describe her look as? I guess I look like a single mom, even though I don't have any kids.
Yeah, or like, I think one of the other writers says that she's always overdressed in her work clothes. And
yeah, so she's invariably in a sort of younger look of always dresses or skirts.
Yeah.
And then you have the third woman who interestingly lands somewhere in between, where she has the very sort of classy, I'm a rich person look of Catherine, but a more feminine style, a la Molly.
Yeah. Yes.
And I thought, for a movie written by women, directed by a woman, they very much were they did a lot of characterization through the clothes. The costume design I thought was really good, and I was kind of impressed at how well they carried off the look of each of the women to give them more backstory than you can put on the page.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Overall, definitely a very good movie. The only thing that I think I wasn't as fond of was, I thought the end scene where Emma Thompson is trying to get Mindy Kaling to come back because she's realized that she's been wrong and too harsh or something, could have been a little bit improved. I saw this movie with my fiance Jake, and we were having a debate about the ending, about that last scene between Mindy and Catherine, and Jake thought that she should have stayed because Mindy Kaling's character had gotten a job with Seth Meyers after she had been fired. And Jake thought that she should have stayed with Seth Meyers because it would have been sort of, I think, maybe I'm not getting his words correctly, but it was sort of, she's grown, she's moved on. And I was saying she was only there for 10 weeks. That's not as much time to grow and move on. So I thought it made sense that she went back to Emma Thompson's show. But I do think that it seemed almost out of character or a little, it didn't sit, I thought, didn't sit as well that Catherine was sort of begging her. I thought the dialogue could have been a little improved, and Jake had this good suggestion that instead of saying, I need you to come back, she could have said, I hope you find me deserving of your time. That's what Jake's suggestion could have been, because I think Catherine's dialogue of I need you, like, come back felt a little off for some reason, and we both thought that it could have been a little bit improved, and then Jake suggested she could have said instead, I hope you find me deserving of your time, which is a catchphrase of her show.
So it is a catchphrase of the show, and she used it to, very great effect when... So as part of the plot, spoiler alert, it ends up coming out that she's had an affair and cheated on her absolutely lovely husband, John Lithgow.
I know, he's so nice.
In just this adorable little gem of very little screen time, but it's freaking John Lithgow. Like, he can make the most of it. And actually, just as a sidebar to that, I made the point, I was talking to some friends about how much I liked the movie, and I was like, Emma Thompson, and they were like, oh, did she really ham it up? And I was like, no, not at all. She just played the role, and neither did John Lithgow, right? Like, he can be...
What do you mean by ham it up?
Like scenery chewing over the top. Oh, okay. Sort of scene stealing, playing a caricature of a person rather than just playing the person. And it was like, no, she didn't. Neither of them
I see.
did.
Okay, I see.
Yeah, and they can, John Lithgow can be as hammy and fun as you want, and he really kept it very understated and beautiful. And so she has to kind of come out, and she has to reckon with the scandal of this, and she has to save her show and talk about how much it's meant to her. And then, she gives her tagline, which just hits with real emotional poignancy. So I'm not sure she could have used it again. But I think what you were responding to was a weird... So what they were trying to do in that scene, I think... So in the scene... Molly has moved to a 5th floor walk-up in Brooklyn, and
in Coney Island.
Yes, and the car pulls up. The driver tries to get her to come down unsuccessfully, and Catherine has to leave the car and go up these 5 flights or 6 flights of stairs, whatever it was, to find Molly.
Mindy Kaling's character.
Yeah, and it's very much the end of Pretty Woman, I think, is what they were trying to do. Okay. With that scene. And then because they're trying to sort of invert the trope of the hero coming to win back the damsel, then they sort of painted themselves into this corner as to what her speech back to try to win her over had to be. So I think what you were responding to is they painted themselves into this little corner where they were trying to make it like the grand romantic gesture from Pretty Woman and from every other movie, where it's about is not about romantic love. Yeah. It's about, a professional situation. And so I think that's partly why it didn't come off. And I still sort of thought it was an interesting way to try to do that, to have it be 2 women and to have it to be about a professional life, not about a romantic life together.
Yeah. Although speaking of romantic things, when they had Molly and Tom being together at the very end, I was like, we didn't need this. I didn't want this. We didn't need this.
We didn't need this, but I will at least give them credit for the literally the only yucky love stuff in this entire movie was him leaning over and kissing her shoulder. So I'm like, if we were going to go this route, thank goodness
No, it was...
They didn't sell us on this relationship or try to make it gross and romantic.
But it almost made it... So, I do enjoy that they had a friendship.
Right.
That their friend... That he did go from being sort of the only mean guy to becoming her friend later. But that almost made the ending feel worse because I agree. I wasn't expecting anything romantic to happen. I wish that had also kept...
I totally agree.
...a work experience.
Yeah.
We were joking, it's like the movie was at a 9, and just for that one kiss, it went down to an 8.
Yeah, I agree. Something else I thought was really funny that they did, there's like... This is getting into some of the more minor points. There's a scene where... After, the scandal has broken and Catherine is all depressed and she's like sitting on her couch in the dark, smoking a cigarette, being depressed. And it was like, oh, that's like the common shot of like every post-breakup scene of every young woman in a movie. It's a very sort of teen or maybe slightly older than teen drama look. And I was like, nice to again, substitute that trope to an older woman who's been caught having an affair and is worried about losing her marriage, not her boyfriend,
Yeah.
Okay, so having covered most of the cinematic elements, I mean, there's not, this isn't an art house indie film. It was confidently shot. I don't have any big hot takes about soundtrack or editing or and it was done well enough. There were some interesting shots, but camera technique really wasn't sort of the guiding force of this movie as much as costume design was. So
it's a perfectly enjoyable movie.
Yeah. So one of the things that kind of centers this movie, which I actually thought was a pretty kind of a bold move, is that, so the premise of the movie is that Catherine gets called out for not having any female staff, and it's implied she's never been able to keep them. Every time they try to hire a female writer, they get dumped after their probationary period because she can't get along with other women, which again, you see played out with the president of the network as another woman she can't get along with.
Yeah. And with that, I wasn't sure. Yeah, because, I mean, you do definitely see it played out. And I guess I wasn't sure if that mentality really just stemmed from, I have to beat out all the other women to be on top, or if, like, especially with Mindy Kaling's character, Molly is very emotional, so I wasn't sure if Catherine just didn't like how emotional women tend to be, and that's why she didn't like them. What do you think? Like her sort of reasoning for not keeping women on the staff.
Well, I think there's an internalized misogyny that comes with, hopefully is dying out with, that generation.
Yeah.
And, with women in general, where, the woman who's like, oh, I just can't get along with other women. All my friends are guy friends.
Yeah.
Right? Like that girl.
I remember that being very prevalent in my younger school days.
Yeah. And, what that's about is that, again, is an internalized misogyny of like buying into the idea that women really are the inferior sex and what I'm the exception though.
Yeah.
And so I recognize that women are the inferior sex. I can be
one of the boys.
But I can be one of the boys. And there's a good, there's a good tension that you're bringing up, which is one of the things that Molly needs to learn. So you have an interesting juxtaposition. There's so much to unpack in this movie. So I absolutely loved the firing scene.
There was a lot of firing going on in that movie.
So the first man to get fired walks into her
the single
office.
Dad.
Yeah,
not the single dad.
He's not single.
The sole breadwinner.
Yes. And basically wants a raise, and rather than, as she points out, and as every article ever written on the web has pointed out about how to ask for a raise, rather than detail his accomplishments to date or talk about, his professional, where he's gone above and beyond, professionally, he comes in and says, well, I have a baby and a family now, and I really need more money.
Yeah. No, it's like, what?
Yeah. Which she just dismisses completely out of hand and is so irritated that he dare ask for more money as the breadwinner.
For not improving any of his work. And
yeah. And just, she's like, how sexist is it? She's like, that was the justification for why men got paid more than women when women entered the workforce. How dare you demand more money because you have a family to support? I
also loved how she
fires him.
Yeah, I just loved how she compared children to, what was it, like an
addiction.
An addiction?
Yeah. So you sort of see then Molly struggle with this like blatant unemotionality of the boss. And she keeps at various times throughout the movie like seeking compassion. She wants compassion so badly. And what she has to learn in the workplace is that, in fact, she doesn't need compassion. She needs appreciation. She needs genuine acknowledgement of what she's contributing to the work.
Yeah.
And she's just so caught up in her emotions that she feels like she needs this emotional validation. It's like, no, this is a workplace. You need professional validation.
Yeah, and one thing I was also thinking about, I don't know if you feel the same way, but sort of, I was thinking about how, like emotions in the workplace and how, not always, but women tend to be more emotional and wanting that, emotional validation and whatnot. And how I think, maybe not as much now, but from what I've heard about, like in how workplaces used to be, they were mostly men and it was very harsh and mean and whatnot, and how sort of when you have an environment that you don't feel, supported in, that may make you more likely to leave or not do as well. And then that could, if you're not doing as well, that could make you more likely to leave, and how that sort of dynamic could also continue to exclude women from different types of jobs or different types of workplaces. Yeah,
I mean, there's a very pointed scene in the movie where Mindy Kaling Molly, the character Molly, is hosting a cancer benefit, and they all have to stay late. And that's the job. And they keep saying the job is about your whole life, which, Catherine as the boss provides no one any work-life balance. And, it's Molly, it's her dream job. This is the first firing of the movie. And she's like, well, I made a commitment and I'm not, like, I'm going to MC this thing. Like, she just leaves. And she's like, if I'm fired, so be it. This is not reasonable. It is not reasonable to demand these kind of hours from your workforce. And so and
she's also been staying late every other night. This is the one night that she just has to,
she has a firm commitment.
And if she didn't have it, I'm sure she would have stayed.
Right. And so there's a fair amount of work-life balance and in terms of understanding, like, female managers who, again, Catherine's kind of story is that she's sort of overcompensating, right, for being a woman by being tougher than a man, more dedicated to her work. And
also partly why she has all these high-level guests or very intelligent guests and is not pandering to, like, the public. Right. She wants to be better.
Yeah, she says she's built her career on excellence. But one of the main threads of the movie, which I thought this was actually pretty daring, is that, whenever you, and believe me, I've been here and I've heard this response, whenever you talk to anyone about diversity and inclusion, you get, like, why aren't there any women on your corporate board? You get some sort of response along the lines of, well, we need qualified people. Right?
Yeah.
And so the pushback and the whole notion of affirmative action was that if you had two equally qualified people and one person was a woman and one person was a man, you should give it to the woman, right? The tiebreaker should be to support diversity. And it's never worked, and everyone's always accused anyone who's a minority or a woman in a field of being the diversity hire. Even, and to the great, like, annoyance of many, 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 many people who in fact were qualified or more qualified to have that part and, have that role and gotten had to fight very hard for it. This movie does not do that. They flat out say she's totally not qualified and she's absolutely 100% a diversity hire.
No, and I thought that was very interesting, because, well, I also liked how, it's clear that she's a diversity hire in the beginning of the movie, and I'm glad that they talked about it and acknowledged it later in the movie as well. They didn't just leave it on the table. But I'm not sure exactly how I feel about this, but I thought sort of the overall point of women in the workplace and workplace experience and whatnot was almost a little overshadowed by the fact that I guess it's a different point, that it almost got overshadowed because she was so inexperienced and she's obviously not qualified. But I guess there's a different point to be made with her situation. Yeah,
and what she directly, on the note, I mean, it's very blatant, it's not a subtle theme in the movie. What she directly contrasts that with is she sits down to the other person interviewing for that position is very blatantly a nepotism.
Yeah, that is true, yeah.
And it's implied he's like the second generation nepotism hire because the dad used to work there. Now the son, who ends up being the love interest, is the monologue writer, and now he's trying to get his brother in. And there's a moment in her interview where she's interviewing, and the person interviewing her says, "How did you even hear about this job?"
Yeah, because she used to work at a chemical plant.
But it's somewhat implied that this was an insider position. This was never open to the public. It was there was no sense that anyone had an equal shot at getting this job.
Yeah.
And so she sort of calls out, okay, maybe I am the diversity hire, but, white people have used their connections and or large donations of money and or apparently bribing coaches at college.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true.
Like we have all kinds of ways where our unqualified people have gotten opportunities they absolutely did not deserve. So why shouldn't
she
get the shot?
Yeah, just because other people have been playing or cheating at the game for so long, why are you now mad that someone else is quote unquote cheating at the game?
Right. Like this isn't a meritocracy. You didn't get here because you deserved it more. Like, and I was kind of like, wow, bold. Yeah. I actually thought that was a pretty bold take to say where, it's just absolutely acknowledged that she is just a token pick at that. But then, she has to earn the spot with actual talent.
Yes. She does have to keep it with talent. Yeah, one thing I wrote down after thinking about it is that, and I think this came from a review that I was reading about the film, was that the writers on the team, on the team that she comes into, the show's been sort of coasting for years, and so I think the writers' room has sort of gotten very casual, and they're not putting as much effort into, the jokes and whatnot anymore. They're also sort of coasting by, and that, they're putting less effort in, but then the moment she comes into play, they're suddenly sort of guarding their precious jobs from her. Even though they're like, they're all very, very casual about it. And that it is like this, that you were talking about, like sort of this closed system that is keeping other people out.
Right. And, one of the first things she tries to do is, have Catherine make a joke about menopause.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, whoa, nobody wants to hear about the male reaction of like, what, a lady thing? No one wants to hear about a lady thing. And it's like, well, 50% of your audience is perfectly fine with that. Like,
and sometimes the men also want to hear it.
Yeah.
It was funny.
And I was like, you think we want to sit around hearing a whole bunch of jokes about your parts? We don't. They're not funny. Like, yeah, I mean, and so it's funny to me because it's like the most depressing fact about this entire movie and this whole through line of her losing her show is that we actually have never had a female late night host. And to my knowledge, no one's ever considered having one. The closest we have is Samantha Bee.
Yeah, well, also, I think I was debating on putting this in recommendations at the end, but so there's a YouTube star named Lily Singh. She goes by Superwoman
Mm-hmm.
on YouTube. And in the fall, she is actually going to be getting her own late night talk show on NBC. And I think, I guess because there hasn't been one, she will be the first to have a primetime late night talk show, which will be really exciting for her.
Not to mention the fact, as given by her last name, I believe she is Canadian.
Yeah.
And ethnically Indian.
Yeah.
So you're not only getting your first woman, you are also getting a person of color.
Definitely.
Which is, which again speaks,
and she's hilarious.
Yeah, and it speaks to the sort of meritocracy that then can kind of come around from these new formats. Like you can criticize YouTube all you want, but it also gives a way for people who would never have access to audience to get an audience and to what's the word?
Be heard.
Achieve success, to be successful through just their talent.
Yeah.
To create a somewhat of a meritocracy.
Mm-hmm.
Although, of course, the audience's prejudices are there just as much. But,
and YouTube with their algorithm changes.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother issue.
Well, we're putting a pin in that. But it does give some increase.
It's a lower barrier to entry.
That's a great way of putting it. And an economics term. Good for you.
Yeah. I got my degree in something.
Yes. And so... I mean, the movie really tackles a lot of different aspects of being a woman in a workplace, having a female manager, breaking into the boys' club, being the diversity hire, and in what I would say pretty successfully, like a pretty natural way. Like, it doesn't. I think the best thing about the movie is that Molly is on her journey, and there's things that she has to realize. And it's not just that she's the diversity hire, but then she comes in and she kills it. Like, she doesn't. She has to grow. She has to learn to get along with the guys. She gets
a good talk from one of the writers who's there. It's like, you're a writer. Write something. Like, that's how you do well. He gave some actual solid advice that helped her move forward in her job in the company. I think I was expecting, going into this movie, I was expecting some of What Men Want, because in that movie Taraji P. Henson is very qualified. She is the most qualified, but she still gets passed over for promotion. But this one is sort of, it's a different scenario where she's the diversity hire, and all the gatekeeping stuff that we talked about. But she does really well, and she proves and shows that she can bring a lot to the table.
Actually, I should have said this before, and I forgot, because I didn't make a note about it. And so one of the things that the movie does successfully, and really why I just enjoyed it so much, is that, it isn't just a string of fart jokes. Like, there are some real emotional beats in this movie, especially when Catherine has to kind of talk to her husband about having the affair, when she has to face losing the show, when, Molly is just sort of hazed, I guess, a little bit by the guys, when she realizes her idol isn't the most perfect woman ever. Like, there's some real sensitive scenes in the movie. Or just that beautiful scene where John Lithgow and Mindy Kaling, they meet at this party, and she's hiding, and he talks about his Parkinson's. And there's a few emotional beats around his illness. It really, I thought, blended comedy to serve an emotional heart of the movie really well.
Yeah, I agree. Yes.
And that's actually something, What Men Want, which I still very much like. Like, it didn't do that. It didn't really know how to hit the emotional beats as well.
No, that's true. Yeah.
As Late Night did.
This is a very well-rounded film.
I laughed, I cried.
Yes.
I cry at everything. It's not that high a bar.
No, I think I teared up during Catherine's monologue. I didn't full out cry, but I'm also the similar.
Yeah. I did as well. And during her monologue, and again during her talk with her husband about the affair and about what marriage means, and and standing by somebody.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that saves all the characters from becoming caricatures. Like, they seem like real people.
They do.
And then they do a service by having flaws and imperfections. They don't sell you on this message like, oh, of course she was totally successful because she's completely perfect. Like, she's not. And she actually has to learn and grow. And you see a developmental journey for, some of the male characters and learning to accept her. And for the women as well.
Yeah. Oh, I was thinking, I saw in the reviews that I was reading, I saw some debate about having the romantic, I think they were including the affair in this as well, that there was a debate of why even have this romantic subplot on the side. And I can see that for the kiss at the very end, but I did think the affair added a lot of good development to Catherine and the situation and film.
I think it did, and that brings up, like I said, there's a lot to unpack in this movie. So then yet another subplot and yet another part of Molly's journey is that this same sort of womanizer character also hits on Molly, and they end up sleeping together, and then predictably like that goes south, and that's when she and the head monologue writer, who he keeps telling, he's like, oh, we're not equals, I'm the head monologue writer, which I thought he carried off pretty well.
Yeah, he was very good at his part.
And so, again, she makes sort of the classic female mistake. She's the only woman. She sleeps with a coworker. Yeah, and then it goes badly.
One of the one guys who's nice to her in the beginning. And
right. And she sort of has to, they don't give her a lot of, there doesn't end up being a lot of flack for her in the workplace that she did that, which I thought was probably a little unrealistic. But
yeah, I guess it's sort of how much more can you put in?
Right, yeah. And again, that was kind of a weak plot. But I think, they were trying to pack a lot into this movie of like what ends up happening when you're in this position and how difficult it is to navigate. And I don't think that was very successfully handled, but I get what they were trying to say. It's like, there's so many pitfalls waiting for you when you're in this position, and that's one of them.
Yeah, it is. That's true. And also, I think it built up his character, which made the affair part more believable later in the movie, which was actually very emotional and significant. Although, speaking of also unrealistic things, so at the very end of the movie, they go sort of 1 year later and the show's being really successful and it's doing great, but also they show how the writer's room in this whole studio is much more diverse, which is great. But I was thinking, I don't know if all those changes could have happened in 1 year after the movie left us off.
Yeah.
But it's a small point.
Yeah, it is. So it really did cover a lot of ground.
I really liked it when I initially saw it, and then I feel like I keep thinking about more and learning more, and when reading reviews and even having this conversation, which I like when a movie doesn't stop after you watch it. So
yeah, I mean,
actually, sorry. Yeah. The only other final point that I have is, this isn't a huge one, but some of the reviews I was also reading, I think from people maybe who had been, maybe, I don't know if they're in show business or not, but they almost thought that it could have been even harsher or even more to the point of like what women deal with when they're joining a situation like an all-male writing staff, that the movie was almost light with what they had going on, which I thought was interesting. But that's only a couple of opinions. Yeah, I mean, and I'm not in that industry, so I have no idea.
Right, and you have to think, for sure Mindy Kaling was drawing upon her experience joining the writer's room at the office.
Very autobiographical.
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, she had that experience. And while it is absolutely true that she could have joined an incredibly toxic workplace where there would have been rampant sexual harassment, she never would have been accepted. Like, that wasn't the story she was trying to tell. Yeah. And so that sort of gets into the, like, why didn't you make this movie criticism, which is, to me, never fair. Like,
That's true.
If you wanted to see that movie, go see, like, I don't know.
Well, What Men Want was more of that movie.
Yeah. Go see What Men Want. That was what that movie was about. So, that doesn't... And I think that it's relevant. It's particularly relevant because what the movie is trying to portray is the thing that's often more insidious and harder to fight, which is the sort of casual sexing.
Yeah, and even...
the not over the top.
No, that's so true. And with racism as well.
Right.
That, like, I was listening to a piece, Trevor Noah was on an interview, and he was saying he almost preferred the, quote unquote, preferred the racism in South Africa more because it's so much more in your face, where, like, in the US, it's very hidden, which makes it harder to eradicate or to deal with.
Right. And, that the sort of casual misogyny and casual racism is hard, can be hard to fight, but it also,
it's very important.
It is very important, and it's sort of, in the like vein of hashtag not all men or whatever, like, not all men are bad and they can learn and they can get better, like, and it's worth showing those stories too.
No, I agree. Yeah.
And there was actually another whole thread of this, which I had a conversation about. We don't have time for on this podcast. We could have made 2 podcasts about this movie. The second theme, which I thought was really interesting and food for thought for anybody going to see this. We could have done a whole separate thing on the evolution of late night television, which we did not do, and which the movie doesn't fully tackle, but it does bring it up as an issue, and I feel like that was something interesting to think about too, and a discussion I had after this movie. So, bringing it all together, I'm struggling with my social impact score because I just had so much fun watching this movie.
Yeah, I really liked it.
But I don't want to overstate how groundbreaking it is, so I think I will give it a very high 7.
Yeah, because I also really, the movie is definitely a solid 8-9 in terms of just regular scoring.
Yeah.
For me. But also one thing that I should have affected my Captain Marvel score, but is sort of affecting my score now, is I don't know how much press this movie's actually getting. Because I think I should have given Captain Marvel a slightly higher score, because even though I didn't like that movie as much, it got so much reach that I think it did have an effect outside of how good the movie actually was. But with this movie, I think it's very, very good, but I don't know if it has as much reach, which may possibly lower the score for me.
So it
might be like a 6.5, 7.
Right. I agree. I think that's a fair score. Recommendations for the week?
Well, I guess go check out Lily Singh. She's a very funny YouTuber. I think because she's focusing on the late night show now, she's not posting as much content on YouTube, but she's got a huge backlog of very funny skits and stories, and she's a very funny YouTuber. And then check her out in the fall when her show goes live.
Awesome. So I am going into the back catalog for this recommendation. Like I said, I've always been a huge Emma Thompson fan. If you haven't seen her and Kenneth Branagh's Beatrice and Benedict in Much Ado About Nothing, they were married at the time. This was when they were still in love. You just won't see a better Beatrice and Benedict. And we hope you enjoyed this episode of Movies That Matter. If you did, please, 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 we really need some reviews. They help us out a lot, and they help people find the show. Our website is still moviesthatmatterpodcast.com. We're transitioning. I think by the time this episode posts, you will see a brand new website. So still we'll have the links to our store and all that good stuff. But it should be easier to play episodes and to share them and to do cool things and get ourselves out to other platforms. So we are working hard to make this a better experience for everybody. Catch us on Twitter at MoviesMatterPod. And remember, movies matter.
And so do you.
We'll see you next time.